This e-lecture is part of Pearson's Professional Development Series for first-year writing instructors.
Hi, I'm Dominic DelliCarpini. I direct the writing program at York College of Pennsylvania. I'd like to talk today a little bit about how we can teach writing in a way that helps students understand their role as both workers and citizens. I'd like you to imagine a scene with me. Joe and Jane are christening their new baby girl. Relatives and friends flock to their house, bearing gifts and good wishes. Grandpa brings Taylor a savings bond for her college education. Aunt Lisa brings her a package of crayons, washable of course, to stimulate her creativity, while Uncle Nick brings her her first book, Pat the Bunny, so she can experience the all-important love of reading. Uncle Michael brings along some educational toys, designed to stimulate the baby's curiosity, which all good scientists need. Amidst all the love and good wishes, baby Taylor's family is already imagining what the child will become. Once she learns to talk, she will become familiar with what will be a key question of her childhood. What do you want to be when you grow up? It is a loving question, a question fraught with imagination and well wishes, with dreams and hopes. And for many, the path to that dream now runs right through the college or university. It wasn't always that way, of course. If little Taylor were part of the high school graduating class of 1900 and going on to college, she'd have been part of only 2% of the population doing so. And since she is a woman and of a minority race, she'd be even less likely to attend college. Just over a century later, over 60% of graduating seniors go on to college, and more than 55% of them are women, though the percentage of college attendees is clearly not spread evenly among all high schools. In any case, whether college seems like a great privilege or just what everyone does, it has become closely linked to what we will become. Recent demographic studies further indicate the pragmatic motives of the present college population. In 1980, 40% of women and 43% of men said they went to college to prepare themselves for a career, up from 21% and 31% respectively, just a decade earlier. Today, a wide majority of students cite career success as one of the primary goals of college attendance. Thus, most students are in the midst of figuring out the work that seems right for them, and that's an important thing for them to be doing. Still, many of us in the liberal arts bristle at these motives. After all, the liberal arts come from a tradition of learning for learning's sake. If the knowledge we encourage in students is purely practical, have we also given in to the calls of a vulgar sophism, teaching skills that are devoid of thoughtfulness, the how without the why? Have we become a friend to the likes of the Marriott Corporation, who funded a DC charter school which featured, and I quote, academic programs and training for careers in the hospitality industry, and which offer paid internships for all 11th and 12th graders? Is there any way to negotiate this divide among the calls for practical knowledge and the desire to educate in ways that inspire more fully engaged and thoughtful citizens? I would like to suggest that by making the interests, hopes, and occupational goals of our students the center of our college writing classrooms, we can invite students to begin the process of constructing, through their writing, an ethos based not merely on the narrow concept of a career, but upon finding a significant life's work. This pragmatic approach to the classroom is rooted in the educational theories of John Dewey. It acknowledges that students do indeed concern themselves with practicalities. As Dewey wrote, if the student had a purely abstract mind, he could bring it to school with him. But his is a concrete one, interested in concrete things, and unless these things get over into school life, he cannot take his mind with him. What we want is to have the child come to school with a whole mind and a whole body and leave school with a fuller mind and an even healthier body. This type of pragmatism is anything but narrowly focused on the ends alone. Pragmatically nurturing our students' engagement with their future work is not only important for their financial gain, it can help students to find their place within a democratic social system. Rather than treat our students' choice of professions as a type of gross materialism, and rather than seeing a separation between those who study the liberal arts and those who are being trained for a particular job, Dewey suggested that we might treat occupational interests and goals as the occasion for further learning. He wrote, while training for the profession of learning is regarded as a type of culture, or a liberal education, the training of a mechanic, a musician, a lawyer, a doctor, a farmer, a merchant, or a railroad manager is regarded as purely technical and professional. The result is that which we see about us everywhere: the division into cultured people and workers, the separation of theory and practice. Dewey foresaw a danger in separating the world of learning, or academics, from the worlds of work, because it could create a division in our society between education and the professions, between the cultured thinkers and the mere workers. Such a world could in turn create a much weaker democracy, since workers were not really involved intellectually in the work they did. They would merely fulfill a role, rather than occupy a more thoughtful, active position. Considered more broadly, our occupational ethos is not wholly determined by our jobs or careers. It is determined by how we think about that work and how much we think about the implications of that work in relation to a society's overall concerns and interests. Part of the job of writing classes is to help students reflect on how they might become informed workers, educated workers, not just trained workers. And good citizenship is closely connected to how we occupy our time. Unreflective workers, simply stated, do not make good citizens. In a study commissioned by the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement and the Center for Democracy and Citizenship, the following results were reported. Overall, young adults see politics and elections more as the business of elites than avenues for democratic participation. Young adults do not see themselves and their generation as particularly significant in the political process. And 4 times as many young adults see volunteering in the local community as important as see getting involved in politics and government as important. Though increased volunteerism is clearly a positive sign, in combination with other signs of political detachment, it seems to indicate that civic involvement has become treated as a leisure activity, albeit a productive one, an activity separate from the primary sense of one's life work and a desire for social change. Robert Putnam, in Bowling Alone, chronicles the collapse of American community. Though Putnam has some doubts about the current role of the workplace in repairing this, he does acknowledge that any solution to the problem of civic disengagement must include better integration between our work lives and our community and social lives. So what does all this have to do with writing or teaching writing? Since the composition classroom is one of the gateways into college, and because it is a reflective place, it offers great opportunities to help students negotiate the seeming divide among the calls of career, liberal learning, and citizenship. Here are some strategies that I have found can develop those connections. First, I encourage students to investigate their personal talents and occupational motives, the reasons for considering such occupations, and the lifestyles associated with their career choices. I begin with personal narratives of discovery, which ask students to reflect on some moments in which they discovered a particular set of interests that can help to account for their present major or career aspirations. A type of disciplinary literacy narrative, this assignment helps students consider the key questions asked by those in a particular discipline or profession. I also ask students to collect narratives from professionals in fields to which they aspire, not only to get at what they do, but at the personal motivations and satisfaction workers find in their occupations. In some cases, I have asked students to perform occupational ethnographies, observing what happens on a job site and considering some key questions. What types of thinking go on there? What reasoning capabilities are necessary? What interpersonal relationships are formed? After these personal investigations, I ask students to consider the language connection, employing assignments and readings through which they can investigate the ways various professions speak and write to one another as discourse communities. These assignments largely take the form of rhetorical analyses of those discourse communities. They are designed to engage students in the conversations taking place among professionals in their field, to make them more apt to be thinking and speaking members of a working community, rather than merely ingesting the already finished discourses of their respective professions. Assignments I have tried include website analyses. What are the commonplaces of these disciplines or professions? What is the community value? For example, I might ask students to investigate the APA website, to consider the values they find there among behavioral scientists. I also assign rhetorical analyses of journal articles. What can we determine about values of the profession from how those professionals reason and communicate? And I often ask students to investigate the public ethos of a profession. I ask students to consider how people in their discipline or occupational area are represented in the media, in communities. What types of roles are they asked to play as expert voices? And what types of language do they contribute to the public discussion on these issues? With these initial concepts in mind, I next encourage students to find ways in which their academic research and study can be treated as a proving ground for intellectual curiosity about their work and about the people who do it. So I ask students to locate current questions or issues in a discipline or occupation. What do members of this community of workers talk, and write about? How are those conversations related to the discipline more generally? I have students find key issues in trade journals, asking them to find professional concerns that are discussed within this discourse community of writers and readers. Finally, I move towards assignments that encourage students to see the connections between the professions and their communities. Here are some possibilities. I ask them to investigate civic organizations and community groups in light of how they employ the occupational expertise of their members, and envisioning what they could contribute as experts in this field. Rather than remain pigeonholed in a particular major, discipline, or occupational field, I ask students to think in interdisciplinary ways. How do professions and academic fields interact? For example, we read an excerpt of Robert F. Kennedy and John Cronin's environmental book, The River Keepers. We then use that book as a springboard to discuss the ways that various citizens use their occupational and disciplinary expertise to promote environmentalism. Students were asked to write a dialogue with the following prompt. An environmental activist, a biologist, and a sociologist walk into a bar. The goal is for students to imagine a dialogue among these three characters on a proposed housing development, considering what each might contribute to this discourse. Another assignment is based on a written account of whistleblowing at work. Students are encouraged to consider how their own occupational ethos can conflict with one's own personal integrity and ethics, and imagine a likely response to a situation they may face at work. I have encouraged students to investigate case studies of professional and community interactions, including things like the Marriott Corporation's involvement in public schools and the various protests against such initiatives. I have encouraged analyses of websites of non-governmental organizations, volunteer and social service organizations, asking them to consider how the work of such organizations involve disciplinary knowledge. I have also asked students to read corporate mission statements and social policies. Ben & Jerry's statement provides a particularly interesting example. Students seem to very much appreciate the opportunity to investigate the areas of study and work to which they aspire. My motives, as I've noted above, are to encourage more active engagement with one's discipline and career, to lessen what Dewey called the division into cultured people and workers, the separation of theory and practice. And I've been impressed so far with my students' ability to come to grips with the commonplace ideas and key discursive tendencies of the various disciplines and career fields. Knowledge that I hope can help them enter into occupations with a stronger commitment to the thinking that informs various professions. But mostly, students have seemed to appreciate the chance to write about the issue most on their mind. What will I become? Perhaps her answer might be, through reflecting and writing about their life's work, that they will become good citizens.
For additional e-lectures, visit Pearson's professional development site for first-year writing instructors at www.pearsonhighered.com/compro.